Hello, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our first MESA Talks of the 2022-2023 school year. My name is Valentina London, and I am the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator at Oregon MESA. I will be facilitating the event tonight, and I just want to give you all a big thank you for joining us. This is exciting, our first MESA Talks of the year, kicking off the school year. I would like to start by going over our community guidelines as well as some housekeeping items before we get into our speaker intros and our presentations. First off, from our community guidelines, please be respectful, listen to understand, listen actively and attentively. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We want any and all of your questions, and we want more conversations to stem off of those questions. And please allow yourself to be uncomfortable. That's the beautiful thing about MESA Talks, is it allows us to think critically and sit in the discomfort of some of the topics that we tackle. And also assume positive intentions. That one's really important. I'll always make sure that you recognize that folks are coming from a positive place with positive intentions. A few housekeeping items for tonight. You may have heard the session is being recorded. So after we record the session, it will then be uploaded to our Oregon MESA YouTube channel. You are welcome to turn on your camera and turn on your video. However, it is not necessary if you do not want to turn on your camera. Mics have been automatically muted. However, there will be a Q&A session at the end for which we will ask you to unmute if you raise your hand to ask a question. But please keep your audio muted until then. Once we ask you to unmute, you will be able to find your microphone icon at the bottom left of your screen, and please unmute before asking a question. It'll be towards the end of the meeting tonight. You can also use the chat function to ask questions during the Q&A if you would prefer. And that being said, we will be closely monitoring the chat, and those who post or do anything appropriate will be removed from the session. Also, please stick around until the end to fill out our feedback form. The link to it will be dropped in the chat, and those who fill out the feedback form will be entered to win some Oregon MESA swag, and will be contacted by email after tonight. So please stick around, and we appreciate all of your feedback, especially if you have ideas for speakers, if you would like to connect us with a speaker, or topics, or just feedback on how to make our MESA Talks better. We're trying to gather interest to see how many of these we can hold and how to hold them in the future. And also, if you have any technical issues during the event and you're unable to chat with us, just remember that the recording of this will again be uploaded to our Oregon MESA YouTube channel, and you can access the talk and share it with anybody that you think might be interested, especially if you're an advisor and you would like to share with your students. You can access the talk on our YouTube channel there after tonight. Our moderator will be keeping track of the questions you ask and making sure that we answer them at the Q&A session. I would like to start tonight's talk, just like we start all of our events. We are a nonprofit housed at Portland State University. So I would like to start tonight's talk by acknowledging those who have lived on this land long before us. This is our land acknowledgement for Portland State University. Portland State University is located in the heart of downtown Portland. In Oregon and Multnomah County, we honor the Indigenous people whose traditional and ancestral homelands we stand on: the Multnomah, the Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, and Wadlala bands of the Chinook, the Tualatin, Kalapuya, and many other Indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It is important to acknowledge the ancestors of this place and to recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. In remembering these communities, we honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. All right, so for those of you or some of you who may not be familiar with what Oregon MESA is or what MESA is, it is an equity program first and a STEM program second. MESA stands for Math, Engineering, Science, and Achievement. It is an acronym, and we've been working towards advancing equity in STEM since 1985. Our program is based in more than 36 schools throughout the state of Oregon. Our students use a invention toolkit called human-centered design, which is an empathy-based approach to solving problems. And our students pick a client, interview them, and come up with an invention to solve a problem in their day-to-day life. This year's theme is designing for environmental justice, and students have been tasked with addressing a need that aligns with this theme and developing an invention for a member in their community. It is also what tonight's MESA Talks topic is about. So what is MESA Talks? MESA Talks is a series that we started back in 2019. During this event, we gather experts to discuss equity in reference to a STEM-related topic. While today we're focusing on our theme, you can look back on our YouTube channel to see conversations that range from discussing broken and inequitable systems, to talking about food access, to talking about issues facing women in STEM. Those are all available on our Oregon MESA YouTube channel. Our mission is to provide students underrepresented in the fields of mathematics, engineering, science, and technology with the skills, knowledge, and opportunities to develop their talents, explore technology-based careers, enter college, and complete successfully in the workforce. With that, I would like to introduce you to our speakers for tonight's MESA Talks event. We have two of them. Tonight, we are joined by two great speakers who will share a lot about the work that they do in the field of environmental justice. Our first speaker will be Vivian Satterfield, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Verde here in Portland. A bit about Vivian. She is a biracial first-generation Chinese American, born and raised in the city of Chicago. Since relocating to Portland in 2008, she has worked in the community at the intersections of environmental, racial, and economic justice, rooted in movement-building principles and progressive values. Vivian is an organizer, policy shaper, and coalition builder with over a decade of experience in nonprofit management and program development, built from foundational experiences as a grassroots community organizer in East Portland, neighborhoods, and on the buses. Her work has secured multiple advocacy policy campaign wins at the ballot and at the local, regional, statewide, and federal levels. Vivian is multilingual in Mandarin, Chinese, and English. We also are joined by Quetzali Reyes, who is an intern for the Community Watershed Stewardship Program at the Bureau of Environmental Services, as well as a student in the honors program at Portland State University. They study social science and Indigenous Nation studies. They identify as a two-spirit Yaqui and Mexica individual, and in their free time, they love doing Indigenous Mexica dance with various Mexica dance circles throughout the Pacific Northwest. Other hobbies include hiking, picnicking, and reading. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. I would like to welcome our first speaker, Vivian. Thank you so much, Vivian, for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Valentina and Quetzali. I'm so excited to share this presentation and time with you today. Really look forward to hearing more about you and about the work that you do. Hi, as Valentina generously offered in my introduction, I'm Vivian. I use she, her pronouns or my name, and I have the privilege of working for Verde. Who is Verde? Well, we serve communities by building environmental wealth through a number of different strategies, social enterprise, outreach, and advocacy. We aim to bring new environmental investments to all of Portland's neighborhoods, but we've had so many successes based where we are in the Cully neighborhood of Portland in Northeast Portland. We also involve and engage community members in the planning and building of these investments, and to ensure that low-income people and people of color directly benefit from these environmental investments. The next slide, please. We believe in building environmental wealth as an anti-poverty strategy. Our work is at this intersection of racial, environmental, and economic justice. That's really the sweet spot, and that's where I personally have my passion in pursuing my work, and that's what gets me going. We believe that environmental work is at the heart of all issues of livability, security, and wealth. Next slide, please. Through our outreach programs, we engage community members, peer organizations, and decision makers who set policy about the connection between not just protecting the environment and conservation, but really about building community and building community wealth. So our education programs provide culturally specific environmental education and leadership opportunities, and they're a lot of fun. Next slide, please. In our energy, climate, and transportation program, we engage with more legislative work, and that combines our outreach and educational work with a legislative agenda. We help build coalitions on a local, state, and national level to collectively move our work forward. And this is where I spend a lot of my time as well. This is where Verde has our advocacy arm, and we've had so many different successes. This is just one example that I wanted to highlight, that we have a recent success in which we were able to pass in the 2021 legislative session, and 100% clean energy for all campaign, which really set a new standard for the entire state of Oregon and also for the country. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that one of Verde's chosen strategies also includes the social enterprise, and so this is what that is. Verde Builds can conceive, design, and implement environmental infrastructure projects. So Verde Builds works to make clean, efficient, and affordable infrastructure accessible to low-income people and people of color. This is a photo, which is an example from our heat response program. If you've been here over the last few summers, you know that our summers have become much more extreme, and this has actually resulted in some deadly heat. And so there's been a concerted effort amongst the city, the county, and the state, working alongside community-based organizations to come up with an approach to ensure that the people who are most directly impacted by these climate change events can be the first people to receive some of these benefits, such as a ductless heat pump, a heating and cooling device, or other things that can mitigate the impacts that these extreme heat events have been having in our community, which unfortunately have been very, very deadly. Next slide, please. This is an example of one of our coalition efforts. This is a unique one because it's actually housed within Verde as a program. Living Cully was formed by Habitat for Humanity, Hacienda CDC, the Native American Youth and Family Center, and Verde. Living Cully works to combat gentrification and displacement and ensure that Cully will always be a place where low-income people and people of color can live and thrive. This is actually a really exciting time to be talking and highlighting the work of Living Cully, because just today, earlier today at Portland City Council, the City Council approved a plan that we've been working on alongside other Cully community members to draw a new tax increment financing district, which essentially will generate revenue in the Cully neighborhood that can be reinvested back into the community based on community priorities that explicitly underline the intention of combating gentrification and displacement. So it's been so much work over 4 years to really, and the conception for the idea came before that, but it's been 4 years of really hard, dedicated work by the community members to create this plan and advocate for it in front of City Council. And today was the final vote, and we've secured it. So that's really exciting, and we will finally be able to generate some real dollars that can help us achieve our goals. The next slide, please. We believe that frontline communities are the most important voices in the climate movement. So through education, engagement, and access to these decision-making spaces, Verde puts these voices front and center in policy and advocacy. Next slide, please. Our programs are designed to strengthen community voices and raise the next generation of climate leaders in communities that experience the harshest impacts of climate change and often have the least amount of access to leadership roles. There's a lot of decision makers, and it's starting to change, albeit very slowly, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, who don't come from lived experience and certainly don't reflect the experiences or demographics of our communities who are hurt first and worst by the impacts of climate change. And so we're working to try to change that. The next slide, please. How we move through our community and experience the land around us is what environmental wealth seeks to build. Verde builds environmental wealth through investments in climate resilience and economic health, improving how we live, play, and work in our communities. All the projects that we pursue are really trying to have these intersectional components in them so that we can ensure that the people who are working on the jobs, the people who are generating the paycheck and the wealth, and the people who are gaining that experience really do come from our communities. The next slide, please. And so we believe that we practice what we preach. When we say that we are uplifting communities through education and advocacy, that is reflected in our staff who often have come from these same communities. We show legislative wins and community investments that people of color can win on climate issues. And I'm so glad that, for this first MESA talk, that environmental justice is your first topic. The next slide, please. This is a project that we're so proud of. And if you've never visited Cully Park, please take this as an invitation to experience this new investment that we have in the city of Portland. It's actually the city of Portland's newest park. Verde turned a 25-acre landfill, a former landfill, and before that it was a mine, not a mine, but it was a quarry. Sorry, it was a quarry, and then it was a landfill. So we turned this 25-acre landfill, which is actually right in the heart of the Cully neighborhood, into Cully Park. Verde was responsible for raising over $14 million from a number of different partners, private investment, different grants, into actually over the 6 years to build this physical park. Through that, we engaged thousands of residents in the design aspect and in the build, and achieved a 70% minority and women-owned business participation. So this is a massive undertaking, and it's on a clear day, as this photo shows, you get some really good views. So please check it out. Next slide, please. And as a part of the Oregon Clean Energy Coalition, Verde organized with communities on the front lines of climate change and environmental injustice, and we helped pass 3 historic energy justice bills. One was the Healthy Homes Act, one was what I formerly mentioned, the 100% Clean Energy for All, and the Energy Affordability Act. And so on this slide, you have a photo of our wonderful executive director, Candace Avalos, sharing a quote supporting, underlining how important the 100% Clean Energy for All campaign is, and how this is a huge step forward for environmental justice in Oregon. The next slide, please. Environmental justice is intersectional and requires a diverse coalition of stakeholders to accomplish a just transition. The movement is still newer to this mainstream, and in our divisive political and climate, coalition building has really been difficult. But I think actually one of the benefits of talking about environmental justice, just as we are here today, is that there's been a greater form of literacy around it, a greater form of understanding. I remember, even in the past 2 years, just seeing a lot more people talking about environmental justice and really talking about the intersectional issues of economic justice, racial justice, and environmental issues as well. The next slide, please. So for the future of environmental justice and Verde ourselves, we see expanding coalitions and the involvement of people in those coalitions. A lot more people are really curious about the environmental justice movement as a result of decaying institutions, especially during the pandemic. And the impact of climate change is being felt more broadly by the general population. So again, as I mentioned with the deadly heat event that we had in Oregon, although frontline communities were hit first and worst, everybody was impacted by that event. So a lot more people, I think, are curious about the environmental justice movement. And so because these impacts are being felt by everybody or being noticed by everybody, their lives are being disrupted by it, I believe that we actually have a captive audience. And this is the opportunity in which we can start prompting the why questions and also delivering the answers of this is how we're going to address this and solve these issues together. The next slide, please. So we have an opportunity to take hold of this narrative and shape it through this intersectional lens. We have built trusted relationships in the community. It's been shaped by years of educational efforts, and we've prepared a generation of frontline communities to lead at this pivotal moment. I've been in this movement since I moved to Portland in 2008, and I'm a millennial. And so I do believe that, at any point in time, people can come into this movement. We need elders to be a part of it. We need to be also educating the future generation. And that's why it's really wonderful to be here with you all today and have this topic of environmental justice be the first one of the MESA Talks. Next slide, please. You got to have hope in this work. So our hope for the future of Oregon and our communities is to build a united agenda that we can all fight for through long-term relationships with allies and partners doing similar work, but also by uplifting more voices of Black folks, Indigenous folks, and other people of color, and deepening our leadership bench of those BIPOC leaders in environmental justice. Next slide, please. A narrative power building question that we grapple with frequently is how do we pull apart the layers to tell the story of the intersectionality of environmental, economic, and racial justice? I believe that everyone has a story, and the sort of magical thing about environmental justice is that you can start from anywhere and make those connections. Next slide, please. Our communities have a vision for the future. Our mission is to see that vision realized through community engagement, advocacy, and building environmental wealth. We believe that we have the solutions. So let's build and share our narratives so that we can shape our future. Next slide, please. And so I wanted to keep it short and sweet because I'm really looking forward to having a robust Q&A. But please stay in touch. I put my contact information here at the bottom. We also have a newly designed website. It's so cool. It's taken us a long time to get here. So please go check it out, verdenw.org. And thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to chatting later.
Thank you so much, Vivian. That was wonderful. I would also like to welcome our second speaker, Quetzpali Reyes. Quetzpali, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I will pull up your slides. Give me 1 second here.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Vivian, for all the work you do with Verde. It definitely sounds very impactful. So my name is Quetzpali Reyes. I use they, ella pronouns, and I'm here to talk to you about the work that I do with the internship that I'm involved with the City of Portland Bureau of Environmental Services, and that program is called the Community Watershed Stewardship Program. Next slide, please. So this program was born out of a wonderful partnership between the City of Portland Bureau of Environmental Services and Portland State University's Indigenous Nation Studies. Students such as myself are selected to complete this about 2-year long internship with the City of Portland. And it's not only about learning how to manage a grant program, it's also about getting out there, talking with community members and underserved communities, BIPOC, and seeing what resources they are in need of and how we can get them connected to those resources. And it's also a great opportunity to meet people not only in the City of Portland, the Bureau of Environmental Services, but also throughout the city, so that you can build relationships. And so when it comes time for me to start my career after QUISP and after I'm done with school, I have connections to fall back on and people that I already know to get involved with. Next slide, please. So part of the Community Watershed Stewardship Program is hooking community members up with native plant certificates. So this is funding so that people can buy native plants from Bosque Dell Nursery, and you can apply at any time throughout the year. There's no due date for the application. And individuals can get up to $50 and businesses and organizations can get up to $500. And this is so that we can repopulate Portland with native plants. Next slide, please. But what I mostly get to work on is the stewardship grant. And what it is up to $12,000 in reimbursement funding for anybody that applies. Their project just has to address watershed health, and it has to involve community building and, of course, equity. So that's what we rank the projects on when we decide who to fund. And yeah, pre-applications are due the first week of January this coming year. Next slide, please. So here are just some dates for our application process that's coming up. Pre-apps are due the first week of January, and then we will sort through those. And based on the 3 criteria I mentioned before, we would invite groups to submit a full application. Yeah, and then those full applications are due at the end of April. And then we get together with community members and other people in the Bureau of Environmental Services to, as a selection committee, to choose who of all the applicants we get to fund. And then we start contracting. Next slide, please. So I will just get into how we rate the projects and how we decide who gets selected for funding, and then I'll talk more about who we're funding this year. So first we look at the watershed benefits that their project will bring about. So we look at stormwater infiltration and detention, if it improves water quality, or habitat and natural area enhancement, and watershed education is definitely valued, of course. Next slide, please. Also, a critical piece is community involvement and partnerships. So it's a definitely good thing if your project involves multiple partnerships throughout Portland, if it involves volunteers and participants beyond the project coordinators. And it's always a good thing if there is a good plan to build and strengthen relationships among the groups and organizations that are involved with your project. Next slide, please. Also very important when we're looking at what projects we'll be funding is their equity plan and leadership of underrepresented communities. So we're looking for a project that is led by or includes meaningful partnerships with people of color, low-income residents, immigrants and refugees, youth and elders, people with disabilities, and we're looking for projects that educate and involve individuals and groups that have not previously participated in watershed stewardship projects. And also if they're located in areas historically underfunded by the Community Watershed Stewardship Program. Next slide, please. So this is just a map of some past projects that the Community Watershed Stewardship Program has funded in the past. And this is outdated. There's about 200-ish projects on this map, but there's been a lot more since this map was made. So I'll just get into some of the projects that I've had the opportunity to work with and yeah, that we're funding this year that I'm involved in the program. So next slide, please. So ELSO Incorporated is an organization that allows for Black identified youth to participate in environmental education experiences led by peer mentors, including water quality investigations, natural area revegetation, garden installation, and invasive species removal. And Gather Make Shelter will work with community partners to bring exploration and learning opportunities in the Columbia Slough watersheds and natural areas to unhoused community members who participate in these services. Next slide, please. So Green Lens will expand tree cover at Lent Elementary School to provide heat relief and reduce air and noise pollution from the nearby I-205 and connect the community to urban ecology and environmental justice. And this project will include multilingual access. And then Grow Portland will partner with Indigenous community members to develop native planting designs, create education curricula, and enhance planting spaces at multiple garden sites. Next slide, please. Okay. And Growing Gardens will work with inmates and correctional officers at the Columbia River Correctional Institution to build a garden and a bioswale. This project teaches healthy watershed gardening practices, providing inmates who are in a recovery program with an increased sense of environmental knowledge and awareness, job credentials, self-agency, and healing. Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership will provide 4th and 5th grade students from a predominantly low-income school with hands-on classroom science lessons, followed by a field trip to experience local wildlife, reinforce classroom learning, and engage in a native plant restoration project. Next slide, please. Oops. Okay, and then this last one is the World Salmon Council. And that brings students from the Blueprint Foundation, Native American Youth and Family Center, Latino Network, and Girl Scouts to mark storm drains, plant trees, and restore riparian areas to learn about and participate in salmon saving contributions. I think there was another slide. I'm sorry, I might have missed it, but it had, yeah, that one. Social Justice Action Center. This center will create a native plant habitat at the center to provide a safe green space where service recipients and volunteers can take refuge and learn about the beneficial functions of native plantings and derive inspiration from the experience. And then Tryon Creek Watershed Council involves immigrant youth in education and on-the-ground watershed restoration and training. Workshops involve an introduction to watershed science and stewardship projects to remove invasive plants and plant natives. So next slide. Yeah, those are just some of the projects that we've got that we're funding this year. And thank you so much for your time. I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you so much, Quetzali. That was so great. It was just both the talks were awesome. I learned so much, and it's really nice to hear what projects you both are working on in our community, and it's very inspiring, and very, very excited to hear what folks have to ask. So with that being said, it is time for the Q&A, questions and answers portion of MESA Talks. We will take questions from the chat, or if you would like to unmute and ask a question, please raise your hand and we will ask you to unmute your mic and ask your question, or you can drop your questions in the chat. I will have it open. Looking for questions from folks. So I will give a few minutes for folks to think about questions they may have, and for those questions to come in, any raised hands, I'll keep an eye out for them. I also have some questions of my own that I can get us started with as well, but I will just give it one more minute and see if anybody has any questions. Okay, I'm going to start with our I think we have one in the chat. So we have a question from Alice Phillips. Alice is wondering, curious to know more about potential volunteer opportunities, either with Verde or BES. Vivian or Quetzali, would one of you like to talk about the volunteer opportunities with either of your orgs? For teens and middle schoolers is the clarification.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the question, Alice. So I can say that there is one area of our work at Verde that I think is actually perfect for youth and, for middle schoolers to young adults, and that's with our rain gardens. So my colleague Reina, they're amazing. What they do is they work with current high school age youth in helping to install rain gardens, especially in mobile home parks and in other areas where there isn't currently good drainage and isn't good stormwater management. And so that comes at no cost to the homeowner, if they're a homeowner, and obviously have the permission of the landlord if it's a renter, but those are really amazing projects. They typically can get done in one afternoon. We will do it rain or shine. Obviously, this is the Pacific Northwest. And so if you want to go ahead and email either myself or just info@verdenw.org, I can get you connected with Reina and we can let you know when our next planting is. We typically probably only need a few hands for that and don't want to overwhelm the current youth that we're working with, but I think that's a perfect opportunity. Thanks for asking.
Renee, we will get to your question. I just want to make sure Quetzali has a chance to answer this question too. Quetzali, do you have any volunteer opportunities at BES for teens and middle schoolers that you could speak about?
I don't know myself. I know my boss is here in the audience and may know of more volunteer opportunities. I think it could be a matter of reaching out to the organizations that we're funding this year and seeing if they need more volunteers. But Jennifer, do you have any other leads?
Yeah, it looks like I can just pop in here for a second. Thanks, Quetzali. We usually direct a lot of our volunteers to so many of our partners, like the Columbia Slough Watershed Council and the Johnson Creek Watershed Council. They have year-round volunteer activities. It could be anything from, you know, finding mussels in the mud, or, you know, doing surveys for dragonflies, or cleaning up the streams. So they're both super active. So I would recommend Johnson Creek Watershed Council and the Columbia Slough Watershed Council.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Renee Anderson, you have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute and ask?
Hello. So I am guessing there are some students on Zoom with us, and I'd like you to be able to tell them how you ended up in working in the field of environmental justice. Maybe what did you major in? What inspired you? So I'm hoping we can inspire some more students to do that.
Yeah, so I'm at PSU still. I'm finishing up my bachelor's in social science and my minor in Indigenous Nation Studies. And what got me into this program is my teacher, Judy Bluehorse Skelton, is a professor, in the Indigenous Nation Studies department at PSU. And that's what I do, is I study culture, and I look for the intersection between culture and environmental issues. I study environmental racism, and studying the history of Indigenous nations and the US government. I found this wonderful opportunity to get involved with the Bureau of Environmental Services, with the city of Portland, and use what knowledge I have about culture, what I've gained from school, to connect with community members directly and connect them with resources that they otherwise wouldn't know about. A lot of people don't know about these grants and native plant certificates that we offer. So yeah, that's just how I ended up in this position. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you.
Kwatapali, it's great to know that you know Judy Bluehorse Skelton, definitely an admirer. So thank you for that. And I appreciate your question, Renee. I actually have a kind of non-traditional path. I went to DePaul University and studied undergrad in Chicago, where I was born and raised. And I was just trying to put myself through school and just get that piece of paper, honestly. And so I studied sociology. I was really curious about how people organize themselves. And just from my own observations of where I lived in the city and the communities around me, and how that was really different in other neighborhoods. I grew up in an environmental justice neighborhood in the city of Chicago. But it wasn't until really I moved to Portland in 2008, just on a whim. I came here knowing actually nothing about it. I thought it was on the coast. Turns out it's not. So I really didn't know anything about Portland when I landed here, super naive. And I got very lucky and got a part-time office manager job at an affordable housing agency. And I just needed to like hustle and work, quite frankly. Didn't have any real work experience outside of working in bars and restaurants and in hospitality. But working in affordable housing actually gave me a lot of opportunity to interface directly with community members. Folks were coming in to pay their rent. I was a low-income renter myself, taking the bus, transit dependent. And I kept saying yes to all the opportunities the organization offered me to get to know Portland more and get to know more about different community organizations. And I showed up at a rally because TriMet here was going to raise the fares and cut service during the recession. And that would impact me, and it would certainly have impacted so many of the residents who are living in the affordable housing of the organization that I was working for. And so I showed up to this rally, and y'all, I saw so many different people that I hadn't seen in Portland before. I saw communities of color, I saw lone people, disabled folks, and the political awakening I had, knowing that Portland had a movement of people who are willing to stand up for their civil rights and who are interested in fighting back against an injustice really ignited my political spirit. And so that's actually how I came into the environmental justice movement. And I started working for an organization subsequently to that, and really cut my teeth as an organizer on the buses, organizing with the youth as well, to help pass Youth Pass. And so that was my entree into the environmental justice movement. I was fortunate enough to spend 6 years working for an organization as a deputy director, and now I'm at Verde, where I've been for over 4 years, also at a director level. So I don't have an advanced degree. I did not learn what I know here in school. I did it all just by being mentored by amazing people, staying curious, and hustling hard, to be honest.
Love that story. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful question and that awesome answer from both Vivian and Quetzalcoatl. We also have a question that kind of ties in with Renee's question from the chat from Andrea Flores Hernandez. They asked, what inspired you to start working in these organizations? So if you have anything you'd like to elaborate, kind of what inspired you to start working specifically at the organization you're at currently. If you have anything to say, you can unmute.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Thanks for the question, Andrea. So as I mentioned, sort of after doing a number of years of work directly organizing, I was interested in kind of figuring out, in my mind, how I phrased it was, I was like, the business side of things, like how do you, like not just like nonprofit management, which obviously I've been doing for a while by virtue of being in a leadership position in the nonprofit sector, but it was more like, how do I like understand how private industry might have a role to play in the environmental justice movement, not just this purely philanthropic and nonprofit industrial complex way of approaching it. And then obviously we have the public sector as well, and government and institutions such as of education, such as Portland State University. I was really curious about this sort of like businessy side of things. And so, and the talk, as I mentioned, Verde has a social enterprise. And so what is a social enterprise? It's just a business really that funnels all, that's mission aligned, that's values aligned, and then it takes any profit that it makes in it back into the organization, into that mission-driven work. And so I was really attracted to the work of Verde, who previously also had a landscape social enterprise and now also has the Verde Builds, which is a general contracting arm. We do installation and direct contracting of weatherization. As I mentioned, the ductless heat pumps, the heating and cooling devices. There's all sorts of other really amazing technology, especially with solar installation. We're doing solar panel installation on the redevelopment of PCC, the Portland Community College redevelopment in the Cully neighborhood. And so I really want to learn, like, how can we flip the extractive business models on their head and really reinvest back into our communities. So again, it's that economic justice component, and that's why I was attracted to Verde. Also, it's a very audacious organization that isn't afraid to experiment, isn't afraid to try new things, isn't afraid to fail and say yes. And that's a lot of the things I admire, and that's why I love Verde.
To answer the question of what inspired me to start working in these kind of environmental organizations, I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, and it's very hot. Every year it gets hotter and hotter and the water is running out. So I grew up with just a lot of eco anxiety. And so when I graduated high school, I moved to Oregon because I heard there were more environmentalists out here. I wanted to get involved in that culture. I felt like Las Vegas culture was very consumer based and not very in relationship with the environment. And so when I was in community college, I started organizing a lot. Any organization I saw that was working towards climate action and intersectional climate work, I joined, so I started learning the basics of grassroots activism, petitioning so that my school could make the switch to 100% renewable energy, and banning plastic cups and takeout containers or styrofoam ones in the city of Eugene, which we managed to do. And yeah, more recently, I've been working with groups like the Oregon Coalition of Land and People's Rights and the United Farm Workers Organization, and Sunrise. And so what inspires me to do these things is just a lot of eco-anxiety. But as I continue organizing and meeting with others that also experience that anxiety, I am more inspired by our collective action and our hope and our belief that we can make a difference and create that more equitable, sustainable future for ourselves. So when Judy offered me this position with the Bureau of Environmental Services, I was very excited for the opportunity to see what it would be like to work with the government, the city, on environmental projects. And yeah, I'm still just doing a lot of learning on how this is going. And just very happy to be here. Thank you.
That's excellent. So it's so great to hear how folks end up at their current organizations that they're working with. Those were some really, really thoughtful answers from both of you. Thank you so much. We have a question from Tong Zhang, who is our executive director at Oregon MESA. Tong's question is, as climate change continues to worsen and climate action continues to become more important, what aspects of environmental justice do you think will become even more relevant to people in the local community?
You want me to start, Kwatapali? Okay, cool. Thanks so much for the question, Tong. I think that if we think about environmental justice as that intersection of racial, social, economic, and environmental assets, it's about the intersection of all that. I think that every single aspect will be highlighted and that everyone in the community will be impacted in some way. But obviously folks who, have layered and intersectional identities will experience it in every single aspect possible. But I think that it'll be relevant to everybody because, again, as I mentioned, especially with the impacts of climate change, as it worsens, especially with just the heat dome effect, every single person was impacted. Folks who work outside jobs obviously were more impacted than those who are currently able to work from home or work from an air-conditioned office, or who have jobs that are not in that. So that's why we saw farm workers, day laborers, really highlighting that we need worker protections. And there's so many folks who came together through this coalition building effort to actually ensure that we codified into law new worker protections for people who do work outside. That was being led by frontline communities. But the underlying component of that obviously is the impact of climate change on those communities and in their lives. And then the articulation of this is what needs to change in order for us to continue to be able to pursue our livelihoods in the ways that we need to right now under these current systems. So yeah, I think there's not one aspect that we can all avoid. And I don't think that, wealthy people will be able to insulate themselves at all from these impacts. And that's why environmental justice is so relevant and so top of mind, because that actually is the intersectional solutions that we need to address this very complex crisis that we're truly in right now.
Yeah, I think this is a hard one, but in terms of environmental justice, and like Vivian was saying, the climate change is becoming more and more visible as it worsens. And I think what is becoming more and more clear is that people that are traditionally marginalized, low-income folks, the disabled, the elderly, Black folks, Indigenous, and people of color are bearing the brunt of climate change, and that it's becoming more clear that basic needs like housing and access to organic, healthy foods it should be more available to everyone. So those are some aspects of environmental justice that I think people are being awakened to. We all need places that are air conditioned once it gets really, really hot. And yeah, I would say that those aspects around housing and food and water access are becoming more relevant to more people. Thank you.
So going off of that, there are aspects that are kind of discouraging, as far as climate change and it continuing to worsen. But what are some of the what is something that makes you, or multiple things that make you hopeful about the work that you do in environmental justice, or the work that you see other organizations doing? Like what are some things you can think about that make you hopeful about this work?
As I continue my involvement in this work, I love to meet more people that make this or prioritize this in their lives as well. Those relationships that we build based on those values around environmental justice and equity and sustainability, those are the relationships that are making me very hopeful for the future. Yeah, I may have more to add later.
Yeah, I completely agree with Bali. I think that because there's no greater and I think I mentioned this before, there's no greater literacy and awareness of what we need to do, because there's all these different reinforcing systems of inequity and of injustice that need to be transformed through a just transition. So everything from the way that we govern, everything from our economic systems, including, obviously capitalism, everything from the awareness that we have of, what we were doing that is so deeply extractive, not just from our natural resources, but also from humans, intellectual and cultural capital as well. All systems currently reinforce one another. And so there's no greater awareness that these are all interconnected and all headed on the very wrong trajectory, and we are all paying the price, and the planet is paying a price. And so this idea about we need to create reform and drastic change in all these different systems are actually happening. So when someone is out there, and what we just did in Portland, if you participated in this year's election, voting to change our charter for the city of Portland, that's deep democratic work and changing a governance system for the better. And that work is, I think, related to climate as well, because the system of governance is a part of the transition that we need to have. Everything's connected, everything needs to change. And so to me, that's an example of hope, right? That in every single aspect, we're seeing people really dedicate their time, their skills, their talents, working alongside other people to come up with solutions for these different systems. And so I see hope in so many things, whether it's a technological improvement, whether it is a governance system like we just had. There's examples of hope all over.
That's really great to hear that, especially coming from from you both that, directly work in this field every day. It's really good to hear that we want to tie it back to the people and, the people in our communities. And that's really great and inspiring. And that also prompts me to ask, what has been most surprising to you about what you've learned through this work? Has there been any significant thing that has kind of surprised you as you've kind of delved deeper into this work that you didn't know before?
Would you like to go first, Vivian?
Sure, Kotabali. So, honestly, the thing that first came to mind is despite, I think, and because we live in such a reinforced system right now in which we think that we can buy the solutions for everything. So the first thing that actually came to my mind is how it's surprising how little money there actually is for real solutions. There's a lot of money being thrown out there, whether it's, Bezos money, whether it's, companies saying that they're going to donate 1%, or, for every purchase you make, we'll go ahead and plant a tree or something. So you have a sense that there seems to be a lot of resources, and a lot of folks like to perpetuate a narrative that the nonprofit industrial complex, and it is, but there's a lot of money flowing out there and everyone's making buco bucks, but not actually creating change. It really surprises me because there's no money for actually frontline communities and environmental justice organizations to be able to enact the solutions that we need in a way that pays community members stipends, that offers all the basic things that you want in order for communities to feel valued and that their time and input is necessary to be able to pay people a living wage, especially here in the city of Portland that's rapidly gentrifying and pricing all of us out. And it offers, dignity and also be able to plan for people's futures and to raise a family. So it's, to me, it's actually quite surprising how there really isn't enough resources in the wealthiest country in the world to really tackle these issues and invest in communities, even with the massive investments that have happened at the federal level. And it is a game changer. It's making such a big difference. And they're real dollars on the ground, but that is just a drop in the bucket. All the billionaires could be funding this work right now, and they're not. They ain't.
Yeah, thank you. That is most surprising to me too. Yeah, I've only gotten a glimpse into how the city is able to manage money, but yeah, it's still a mystery.
Yeah, it's interesting how we have seemingly so many funds for so many things, but yet the things that seem to matter the most and are the most time sensitive and crucial don't just really get overlooked. I don't want to forget to ask, who else do you see doing important work in this space, especially for our students who don't live in the metro area? We do have folks that are joining us from rural parts of the state, and we like to concentrate a lot in Portland, but we also want to highlight who we see doing work in rural communities as well. Is there anybody that you could shout out or point us to?
Yeah, I love this question. Thanks for asking it, Valentina. In the presentation may make it sound like Verde is place-based, and that, even though you can go visit Cully Park and you can, come swing by our office, just let us know maybe ahead of time, because COVID and everything in Cully, we're actually not just based in, we're based in Northeast Portland, but our impact, and we coordinate all throughout the metro area and all across the state. And, most of the state here in Oregon is rural. Work a lot closely with also tribal governments as well. So some of the organizations I want to shout out who are doing this work: Southern Oregon in the Rogue Valley, Rogue Climate, such a strong partner on this work. in Eastern Oregon, UValkyrie is an organization that is led by people of color. Yes, there are people of color, as there is in every part of the United States, but also in Eastern Oregon. They're a really strong partner, especially in our water justice work. We actually just worked with them and a number of other organizations to publish the State of Water Report here in Oregon, which helped some of that work helped secure a historic $530 million investment in water infrastructure in our communities, which is massive. So I can share a little bit more about that in the Oregon Water Futures Project, which is something that we're working with other organizations. There's also a lot of organizations who their stated mission may not be explicitly environmental justice, but there's such a strong partner on climate. So shout out to the Farm Workers Union, Pukun. They're holding it down obviously all across the state, but they've been on the front lines also of climate change, as I mentioned, of fighting climate and making climate action rather. So as I mentioned, the farm worker bill and the workers' rights bill, when it comes to heat, that was really led by them and other partners. A lot of youth organizations, Quetzalcoatl mentioned, Sunrise obviously is being a factor as well, and organizing with them. Yeah, that's just some of the organizations I want to give a shout out to, but I have a long, long list of people that I admire and work with as well.
Yeah, I found Sunrise to be really accessible even throughout the pandemic. As a young person to organize with them, they really provide the resources you need to make change in your school or your workplace or wherever you find yourself in. They give you the resources that you need to be able to talk to people about climate change and organize around it. I've also had the opportunity to work with the Portland Youth Climate Summit. They put on a summit every year and convene to talk about climate equity solutions and all that, and they get a bunch of different youth-led organizations together. So yeah, there's Sunrise. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I know a lot of people are out here doing very good work.
Excellent. Oh, that was such a great Q&A section. I want to give one last chance to folks in the audience. If you have a question, you can raise your hand, you can unmute and ask your question. If you want to drop it in the chat, I want to give one last chance for those folks in the audience that haven't had a chance to ask a question, because we're going to move on to our call to action section of the talk. All right. I don't see any raised hands. Moving. So we usually ask our speakers to leave us with a call to action. This theme tonight is specifically tied to our challenge theme for our students. So, if you want to suggest any places where they could get involved. We work with mostly middle and high school students, maybe where they could be most effective in furthering the cause of environmental justice, or where they could reach out to for clients. If there's a specific point of contact at your organization that you would like to shout out as well, there can be many different calls to action. But I would like to start with Vivian. If you're ready, I would love to hear your call to action.
Yeah, so I have a number of things that I want to highlight. As I mentioned, the installation of rain gardens is something that we enjoy doing. We do also a lot of outings with our Club Aves program, working with even younger youth. Cool things like kayaking in the slough and doing other nature and environmental based education. And so you can absolutely just reach out to me and I can connect you with those staff folks who I'm sure would love to tell you about what the schedules look like, to be able to pair it also with your interests and volunteer skills. As I also mentioned, we're just changing our form of government here in Portland. It's super exciting. It actually is a need for volunteers to help with making some really key decisions on that. So the City of Portland's Independent District Commission is taking applications right now. They're looking for 13 people from the City of Portland, folks who, you know, are currently living in Portland. You don't have to have any expertise at all to help change our city form of government and to help put your opinion on how that should be implemented. And so please go ahead and you know, take a look and see if that's a commitment that you'd like to make and put in your application. You know, like I mentioned, like all these different systems reinforce one another. And if we're going to make a change, we need to make a change in every single aspect. Yeah, those are the two that I want to highlight for now. And of course, check out Verde and W. You know, sign up for our newsletters. We're in the Willamette Week Give Guide right now. So if you wanna check it out and see some cool incentives that we have to help make our fundraising goal, because as I mentioned, there's never enough resources for this work. Share that with your friends. Share that with someone you know who has a few extra bucks to toss. Yeah, we're in the Give Guide in the Willamette Week. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Quetzalcoatl, I'm going to pass it off to you for your call of action.
Yeah, I would invite you to get involved with organizations like Verde and with Sunrise. What I did was just reach out to any environmental organization that I saw in my community that needed help, but of course, only do as much as you are capable of doing. But yeah, just through reaching out and making those connections, I was able to meet other people with those values of environmental justice. And that's the way that I've found I've been able to make impactful change is directly speaking with community members and connecting them with the resources that I know of that they might need. Also would just be to stay in school and take classes on environmental science and environmental justice, around social science, and all of those. They can be very helpful, and you can meet professors that can connect you with environmental internships, and you can start making a change that way. Yeah, I just invite you all to stay curious and be open to meeting new people. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to both of you for those great call to action. And as they both mentioned, you can find Verde at info@verdenw.org. Their website is www.verdenw.org. And Quetzalcoatl shared about the Community Watershed Stewardship Program at Bureau of Environmental Science. And their email for the Community Stewardship Program Coordinator is here, communitystewardship@portlandoregon.gov. There's also a phone number for them. So please tap into those community resources. Also, don't forget, if you haven't already, please connect with us, Oregon Mesa, through our various avenues. MESA Everyday is our website resource for students. You can type in everyday.oregonmesa.org, and we have information about upcoming events and career and college resources. And also we have our various social media handles, YouTube, LinkedIn handles and links listed here. You can also watch this recording of this and past MESA Talks on YouTube. This one will be uploaded, and as we mentioned in the chat, it will be enabled to press the option to enable subtitles. So if you want to show it to somebody that speaks a different language, Spanish or any other language, you can enable that, and that will be automatically autofilled on YouTube. We also have a few announcements here at Oregon Mesa. We have our 2022-2023 enrollment forms due this Friday, November 18th. If you're an advisor, if you're a parent or a student, please remember that students must fill out the enrollment form with their parent and legal guardian. It does act as a permission slip, and you can find the link to the form on our MESA Everyday website. You can also reach out if you're an advisor to the regional coordinators. You can reach out to us directly at our Oregon MESA email. We've been dropping all those links in the chat as well. Also, please vote for Oregon MESA in the education category for the First Tech Season of Giving Award. We have until the 24th to get our votes in. The link will be shared in the chat for that. We are in the top 3 on the education category, and we do get some money if we win, so please vote for us. And for upcoming events, please stay tuned for updates about our next Career Conversations event. We recently hosted a Career Conversations Hispanic Heritage Celebration at Hacienda CDC, and that is also available on our YouTube. It is entirely in Spanish with speakers from the engineering field, and it is subtitled in English if you do not speak Spanish, but we will be hopefully hosting more of those. So please stay tuned, subscribe to our newsletter, and email us if you have any questions. Thank you so much for coming to our first MESA Talks of the school year. This was wonderful. Thank you to our speakers, Vivian, Quetzpali. Thank you so much to everybody for your questions and for making this such a wonderful event. And I hope that you all have a great night. Thank you all.